Imagine sitting alone in a quiet room, the kind of silence that presses in on you rather than comforts. The clock on the wall keeps ticking, but time itself feels suspended. Your chest feels tight, not from any physical injury you can point to, but from something deeper, an ache that started weeks, months, or even years ago and has never fully left. Maybe it began with the end of a relationship that once felt like home, or the moment a career you had built with discipline and hope suddenly slipped away through no single mistake of your own. Perhaps it's the quiet erosion of confidence that comes from repeated disappointments, the kind that make you question whether you're capable of the life you once envisioned. This is the territory of darkest pain, not the dramatic, cinematic version we sometimes see portrayed, but the everyday reality that millions of people move through right now. It doesn't always arrive with sirens or announcements. It often shows up as a slow burn, the weight in your shoulders when you wake up, the way your mind loops back to the same unanswered questions at 3 a.m., the subtle withdrawal from activities that once brought joy. The body keeps score in its own language, tight jaw, shallow breathing, a persistent fatigue that no amount of rest seems to touch. And the mind, trying to protect you, offers its familiar defenses: numbness, anger, endless analysis, or the quiet hope that if you just ignore it long enough, it might fade. What makes this pain feel especially heavy is the sense that it isolates you. Even when surrounded by people who care, you may notice a gap, an invisible barrier between your inner experience and what you can comfortably share. Words like, "I'm fine," slip out automatically, because explaining the full depth feels too vulnerable or too exhausting. Yet beneath that surface response, a quieter voice persists. Is this all there is? Will I ever feel like myself again? These questions are not signs of weakness. They are the human mind doing what it does best when faced with threat, searching for meaning, for safety, for a way forward. Here is where the possibility begins to emerge, not as a dramatic revelation, but as a quiet, steady observation. Pain, in its raw form, is information. It signals that something important has shifted in your world. It alerts you to values you hold deeply, to needs that may have gone unmet for too long, and to strengths you may not have needed to call upon until now. The discomfort itself is not the enemy. The way we sometimes relate to it, resisting it, judging it, or letting it define our entire identity, that is what can prolong the suffering. When we begin to meet pain with curiosity instead of condemnation, something starts to change. Not overnight and not without effort, but in increments that compound over time. Think about the people you have known or perhaps even observed from a distance who have walked through their own versions of this darkness. Not the polished success stories that skip the messy middle, but the real accounts. The person who, after a devastating financial setback, learned to distinguish between what they could control and what they could not, and emerged with clearer priorities and sharper decision-making. And the individual who, after a profound loss, found their capacity for empathy expanded, not because they sought to become better, but because the experience stripped away superficial layers and left them more attuned to the quiet struggles of others. These shifts do not erase the original pain. They sit alongside it like new growth appearing beside an old scar. Psychological research on human resilience has observed this pattern repeatedly across diverse populations. When people are willing to face their distress directly without rushing to suppress it or dramatize it, they often report an increased sense of personal strength over time. They describe discovering resources within themselves they had not previously recognized. Relationships that survive the test of honest vulnerability tend to deepen. A sense of new possibilities can open up, not as empty optimism, but as a realistic recalibration of what matters most. These outcomes are not guaranteed for everyone, nor do they happen automatically. They tend to appear more frequently when individuals engage with their experience intentionally using awareness, reflection, and small, consistent actions. This audiobook is not promising a quick fix or a magical turnaround. It is offering a structured path, one that respects the reality of pain while inviting you to explore its potential as fuel. We will move through this together at a deliberate pace. No rush, no pressure to feel anything other than what is true for you in this moment. The process we will explore involves several key phases, each building on the last. We begin by learning to acknowledge pain fully, without resistance or self-criticism. From there, we examine ways to reframe it, not to deny its difficulty, but to extract usable insights. We then develop practical tools for regulating the emotional intensity so it does not overwhelm your daily functioning. Next comes the cultivation of inner discipline and strength that allows you to act even when motivation is low. We explore how to channel the energy of that pain into purposeful action and meaningful goals. Finally, we look at how to integrate these changes so they become a sustainable part of who you are, rather than a temporary phase. Throughout, the emphasis remains on ethical self-development. This is not about using your pain to manipulate circumstances or people. It is about building clarity, integrity, and responsibility within yourself so that your influence on the world around you becomes more constructive. Mutual benefit, clear communication, and personal accountability are the cornerstones. The power we speak of here is not dominance over others. It is the quiet authority that comes from knowing yourself deeply, regulating yourself effectively, and choosing your responses with intention. You may notice as we go along that certain ideas resonate immediately while others feel more distant. That is natural. Human change rarely follows a straight line. Some days you may feel the shift clearly, other days the old patterns reassert themselves. The key is not perfection but persistence and self-compassion. Each time you return to the practices, even after a setback, you reinforce new neural pathways. The brain's capacity for adaptation is remarkable, especially when we give it consistent, compassionate direction. Let us be clear about one more thing before we move forward. Turning pain into power does not mean the pain disappears entirely. Some experiences leave marks that remain part of your story. What changes is your relationship to those marks. They stop being the central definition of who you are and become, instead, part of a larger narrative, one that includes resilience, insight, and the ability to contribute meaningfully to your own life and the lives of others. This shift tends to happen gradually through repeated small choices rather than one dramatic moment. As you listen, I invite you to bring your full presence to these words, not as a passive recipient, but as an active participant. And notice what arises in your body and mind as we explore each idea. There is no correct reaction. There is only your honest experience, which is the most valuable data you have. If emotions surface, grief, anger, relief, even skepticism, allow them space. They are part of the material we are working with. We stand at the threshold now. The darkness you have known does not have to remain a dead end. It can become the raw material from which something stronger and more authentic takes shape. Not because the universe owes you a reward, but because the human capacity for growth is real and observable when we engage it with discipline and care. The path ahead asks for your courage, your honesty, and your willingness to experiment with new ways of relating to yourself and your circumstances. In return, it offers the possibility of a life that feels more integrated, more directed, and more resilient, even in the presence of life's inevitable challenges. This is not a theoretical discussion. It is a practical guide rooted in psychological principles that have helped countless people navigate their most difficult periods. The strategies we will cover increase the likelihood of meaningful change when applied consistently. They do not guarantee outcomes because no honest approach to human experience can promise that. What they do offer is a clear framework, tested across time and cultures, for meeting pain with awareness and turning its energy toward constructive ends. Take a slow breath with me right now. Feel the air move into your lungs and then release it gently. You are here.
You have already survived everything that has happened up to this point. That alone is evidence of your inherent capacity. The next steps are yours to choose, one listening session at a time. We begin. As we move into this first section together, let us begin exactly where lasting change becomes possible, with the deliberate and complete acknowledgement of the pain you have carried. This is not a dramatic confrontation or a forced emotional purge. It is a quiet, steady turning toward what is already present inside you, without the layers of resistance we so often add. Many people spend years circling around their darkest experiences, naming them lightly, analyzing them endlessly, or pushing them aside in hopes they will lose their grip. Yet the research on human emotional processing shows that true acknowledgement, approached with calm awareness, tends to create the space where something new can begin to form. It does not eliminate the pain immediately. What it does is stop the quiet draining of energy that comes from pretending it is not there. Consider for a moment how the mind naturally responds to discomfort. When pain arrives, whether it stems from loss, betrayal, failure, or a slow erosion of self-trust, the initial impulse is often protection. We might distract ourselves with work, relationships, or routines that keep the surface of life moving. Or we turn inward with self-criticism. Why did I let this happen? What is wrong with me? These responses make sense from a survival perspective. The brain is wired to seek safety, and avoidance or judgment can feel like short-term shields. Over time, however, they tend to keep the pain alive in subtler forms. Suppressed emotions often show up later as unexplained fatigue, irritability that surfaces without clear cause, or a vague sense that life is happening at a distance. Rumination, that endless loop of replaying events, can strengthen the neural pathways of distress rather than weaken them. In many cases, this cycle increases the likelihood that the original wound remains central to daily experience, even when the external situation has long since changed. Acknowledgement interrupts that cycle not by fighting it, but by meeting it directly. Imagine sitting with a heavy stone in your hand. If you grip it tighter in an attempt to make it disappear, your muscles tire and the weight feels even more burdensome. But when you simply hold it, observing its texture, its temperature, its actual size without demanding that it vanish, something shifts. The effort of resistance eases, the stone remains, yet your relationship to it begins to change. Pain operates in much the same way. When you allow yourself to name it plainly, this hurt. It still echoes in me here and now. Without immediately rushing to fix it or explain it away, you create room for clarity. Psychological studies on emotional acceptance consistently point to this pattern. Individuals who practice acknowledging difficult feelings without judgment often report a gradual reduction in the intensity of those feelings over time, not because the events are erased, but because the internal struggle against them diminishes. Let us explore this idea a little further through the lens of everyday human experience. And think of someone you may have observed, or perhaps someone you know personally, who seemed to carry a heavy burden with unusual steadiness. They did not deny the hardship. They did not broadcast it either. Instead, they appeared to have made a quiet peace with its presence. That steadiness did not arrive overnight. It usually develops through repeated moments of honest recognition.
I feel the ache in my chest when I remember what happened. My energy dips in the afternoons, and that is understandable given what I have been through. My confidence feels shaky in certain situations, and that makes sense right now. These statements are not self-pity. They are accurate observations. And accuracy in the realm of inner experience tends to restore a sense of personal agency. When you stop arguing with reality, you free up cognitive resources that were previously spent on denial or defense. Now let us turn this into something you can apply directly. Right where you are, as these words reach you, try a simple practice of acknowledgement. You do not need to close your eyes or change your posture unless it feels natural. Simply bring your attention to the present moment. Notice the sensation of your breath moving in and out, nothing more. Then gently invite awareness of the area where your pain tends to live. It might show up as a tightness in the throat, a heaviness behind the eyes, a restlessness in the limbs, or a persistent thought pattern that loops in the background. Name it neutrally, like as if you were describing the weather. There is sadness here. Or tension sits in my shoulders today. Or a sense of emptiness lingers when I think about that chapter of my life. Do not analyze why it is there. Do not demand that it leave. Just observe it the way you might watch clouds passing across the sky, present, changing, yet not requiring your intervention to exist. Stay with this for 30 seconds or so. If the mind wanders, which it likely will, simply return to the breath and the neutral naming. This is not meditation in any formal sense. It is a practical skill of turning toward what is real inside you without adding extra layers of story. You may notice, even in this brief exercise, a subtle shift. The pain does not vanish, but the feeling of being trapped by it often softens slightly. That softening is important. Why it signals that the nervous system is registering safety that comes not from the absence of difficulty, but from the absence of internal war. Repeat this kind of acknowledgement regularly, perhaps once or twice a day at first, and you increase the likelihood that your relationship with the pain begins to evolve from one of adversary to one of informed companion. The discomfort remains data, and data, when received clearly, can guide wiser choices ahead. Of course, this step is rarely effortless. Common challenges arise. Some days the pain may feel too sharp to approach directly, and that is understandable. On those days, you might shorten the practice or pair it with a physical anchor, placing one hand on your chest or simply feeling your feet on the ground to remind yourself that you are safe enough in this moment to look. And others find that old habits of self-judgment creep in. I should be over this by now. When that happens, treat the judgment itself with the same acknowledgement. There is criticism arising too. This gentle inclusion prevents the process from becoming another form of self-attack. Over weeks and months, these small acts of honest recognition tend to build a foundation of inner stability. You begin to trust that you can face what is true without being overwhelmed by it. It is also worth noting that acknowledgement does not mean broadcasting your pain to everyone around you. This is a private, internal process first. You decide when and with whom to share, and you do so from a place of clarity rather than urgency. The goal is not to make others carry your load, but to stop carrying it alone in secret. In many cases, and this internal honesty improves how you show up in relationships. You communicate more directly. You set boundaries with greater calm. You listen to others with less interference from your own unacknowledged needs. These outcomes emerge naturally when the foundation is solid. As this section draws to a close, recognize what you have already begun. By choosing to listen and reflect in this way, you have taken the first deliberate step toward turning pain from something that controls you into something you can understand and eventually direct. This acknowledgement is not the end of the journey, it is the ground on which everything else will stand. When you know what is truly present without distortion or denial, you gain the clarity needed for the next movement, learning to see that same pain through a different lens, not as a sentence, but as raw material that can be shaped. You have the capacity for this. You are demonstrating it right now by continuing. That quiet strength is already within you, waiting to be strengthened through consistent, compassionate practice. Now that we have established the foundation of clear acknowledgement, we turn our attention to a pivotal shift that often marks the beginning of real transformation, the art of reframing. This is not about denying the reality of what you have experienced or forcing a false positivity onto it. It is a measured, honest process of examining the pain through a wider lens, one that reveals its potential to serve as raw material rather than remaining solely a source of limitation. In many cases, the way we initially interpret our darkest moments tends to keep their weight centered in our daily awareness. Reframing gently widens that frame, allowing us to notice aspects that were previously obscured, and, in doing so, it increases the likelihood that the same energy begins to move in a more constructive direction. Let us consider how this looks in practice. When pain first settles in, perhaps after a profound betrayal, an unexpected loss, or a long period of quiet failure, it often arrives wrapped in a single dominant story. The mind, seeking to make sense of the threat, constructs a narrative that feels protective. This happened because I am not enough, or people cannot be trusted, or life will always find a way to pull the rug out from under me. These interpretations are understandable. They arise from the brain's natural attempt to predict and avoid future harm. Yet over time, they can narrow our field of vision so tightly that every new experience gets filtered through the same lens of defeat. What begins as a reasonable response to a specific event can gradually become a general filter through which the entire world appears dimmer. Reframing interrupts this narrowing without invalidating the original hurt. It asks a series of calm, open questions that invite perspective without demanding immediate answers. Questions such as, what specific value was at stake in this experience that made it hurt so deeply? What strength did I have to summon simply to survive it? In what small ways has this difficulty already begun to shape my awareness or my choices for the better? These are not rhetorical exercises designed to produce quick comfort. They are practical tools for expanding awareness. Psychological observations across various studies of resilience show that individuals who regularly engage in this kind of deliberate perspective taking often report a gradual increase in their sense of personal agency. The pain itself does not vanish, but its meaning begins to evolve from something that defines them to something that informs them. Imagine, for a moment, the difference between two people facing similar hardships. One carries the story, I was broken by this, and every decision afterward is colored by that belief. Hesitation in new opportunities, guardedness in relationships, a quiet expectation of further disappointment. The other, through consistent reframing, begins to hold a different internal narrative. This revealed capacities in me I had not needed before. It clarified what I truly value, why it taught me boundaries I now honor more carefully. Notice that neither story erases the original facts. Both acknowledge the difficulty, yet the second version tends to open pathways for action where the first tends to close them. This is not wishful thinking. It is the observable effect of how the human mind organizes experience. When we consciously choose to include additional layers of meaning, layers grounded in observable reality rather than fantasy, the emotional charge often begins to redistribute itself. To make this concrete, let us walk through a simple reframing practice you can use right now. Bring to mind one specific element of the pain you acknowledged in the previous section.
Hold it lightly in your awareness, then ask yourself 3 gentle questions, or speaking them internally or even jotting them down if that helps. First, what did this experience teach me about my own values or needs that I might not have seen as clearly before? Perhaps it showed you the importance of honest communication, or the necessity of protecting your time and energy, or the depth of your capacity for endurance. Second, in what ways did I demonstrate resilience or resourcefulness during or after the event, even if it felt minimal at the time? Maybe you kept showing up for responsibilities when every part of you wanted to withdraw, or you reached out for support when isolation felt safer. These are not small things. They are evidence of inner strength already in motion. Third, if this pain were to serve some future purpose, not as a reward, but as information, what might that purpose look like in practical terms? Could it sharpen your ability to recognize similar patterns earlier? Could it deepen your empathy toward others facing parallel struggles? Could it fuel a clearer sense of direction in your work or relationships? Sit with these questions for a few minutes without forcing answers. Let the mind wander around them naturally. You may notice resistance at first. That is common. The old story has had time to settle in and may feel familiar, even comfortable in its predictability. But each time you return to the wider questions, you strengthen the neural pathways associated with possibility rather than limitation. Over repeated sessions, this practice tends to create a more balanced internal dialogue. The pain remains part of your history, yet it begins to occupy less of your present attention. It is important here to emphasize that reframing is an ongoing skill, not a one-time event. Life will continue to present new challenges, and old pain can sometimes echo in unexpected moments. When that happens, you simply return to the same process. Acknowledge what is arising, then widen the frame again. This repetition builds a kind of psychological flexibility, the ability to hold discomfort while simultaneously seeing options for response. In many cases, people who develop this flexibility report that their relationships improve because they communicate from a place of clarity rather than reactivity. They make decisions with greater steadiness because their self-view is no longer anchored solely in past wounds. And perhaps most significantly, they begin to experience a quiet confidence that emerges not from the absence of difficulty, but from the proven ability to meet it with awareness. Of course, there will be moments when reframing feels impossible or even inappropriate. On days when the pain is particularly sharp, it can be wise to set the exercise aside and return to simple acknowledgement until the intensity eases. This is not failure, it is wise pacing. The goal is sustainable progress, not heroic endurance. Some individuals find it helpful to pair reframing with a physical or environmental cue, taking a short walk while considering the questions, or sitting in a favorite quiet space to anchor the practice in the body as well as the mind. These small integrations help the shift move from intellectual understanding to lived experience. As we close this section, recognize the quiet power you are already cultivating. By choosing to look again at what once seemed only dark, you are demonstrating a form of inner authority that cannot be taken from you. This is the beginning of turning pain from a weight that pulls you downward into a resource that can be directed forward. The reframing you practice today does not guarantee an easier tomorrow, but it measurably increases the chance that you will meet tomorrow with clearer eyes and a steadier hand. That clarity and steadiness are the foundations upon which real strength is built, not through force, but through honest, repeated choice. You are already moving in this direction simply by continuing. Carry that awareness with you as we prepare to explore the next essential step, learning to regulate the emotional intensity so that it becomes manageable fuel rather than an overwhelming force. I'm building directly on the reframing work we have begun
We now step into one of the most practical and transformative phases of this process. Learning to regulate the emotional intensity of your pain so it no longer dictates the rhythm of your days. This is not about suppressing what you feel or pretending the discomfort has lessened when it has not. It is about developing a set of reliable internal tools that allow you to experience the full truth of your emotions while preventing them from overwhelming your ability to function, decide, or move forward. When emotional intensity remains unregulated, even well-reframed pain can still pull focus, drain energy, and interrupt the small, consistent actions that create lasting change. Regulation changes that dynamic. It turns the same emotional energy from a disruptive force into something you can observe, contain, and eventually direct with greater steadiness. Consider how this plays out in real human experience. After a significant loss or setback, the nervous system often stays in a heightened state of alert, as if the original threat is still active. Thoughts race, the body tenses, sleep becomes fragmented, and concentration narrows to a pinpoint. These responses are the body's intelligent attempt to protect you, yet when they persist unchecked, they can keep the pain looping at full volume long after the external circumstances have shifted. Psychological research on emotion regulation consistently shows that individuals who develop simple, repeatable methods for modulating intensity tend to experience improved daily functioning, a clearer decision-making, and a stronger sense of personal agency. The pain does not disappear, but its grip loosens enough for you to live alongside it without being consumed. The foundation of effective regulation is learning to notice the early signals of rising intensity before they crest. This awareness itself is a skill that grows with practice. Right now, as these words reach you, pause for a moment and scan your body from the crown of your head down to your feet. Notice any areas of tightness, heat, heaviness, or restlessness. Name them neutrally in your mind. There is tension in the jaw. A heaviness sits in the chest. The shoulders feel braced. This quick body scan takes less than 30 seconds and serves as an early warning system. When you catch the intensity while it is still building, you gain a crucial window of choice. You can intervene before the wave becomes a flood. One of the most accessible and evidence-supported tools is intentional breathing, not complicated patterns or forced control, but a simple, extended exhale that signals safety to the nervous system. Try it with me now. Inhale gently through the nose for a count of 4, then exhale slowly through the mouth for a count of 6 or 7, longer than the inhale. Repeat this cycle 4 or 5 times. You may notice a subtle softening in the body, a slight drop in heart rate, or a quieting of mental chatter. This is not magic. It is physiology at work. The longer exhale activates the parasympathetic response, which tends to dial down the intensity of emotional activation. Use this breath anytime you feel the pain beginning to spike, before an important conversation, during a sleepless hour, or when old memories surface unexpectedly. Over time, it becomes an automatic anchor, increasing the likelihood that you can remain present even when the feelings are strong. Another practical approach is the technique of emotional labeling combined with containment. When a wave of pain arrives, grief, anger, emptiness, or a mix of all three, name it precisely and then set a temporary boundary around it. You might say internally, this is grief rising and it is understandable given what I have been through. I will give it space for the next 10 minutes and then I will return to the task at hand. Then, if it helps, set a timer and allow yourself to feel it fully within that window. Perhaps by writing freely in a private journal or simply sitting with the sensations. When the time ends, gently shift your attention to a neutral or constructive activity, making a cup of tea, taking a short walk, or completing one small, practical task.
This is not avoidance, it is structured permission followed by deliberate redirection. In many cases, people who use timed containment report that the intensity peaks and then naturally recedes more quickly than when they let the emotion run unchecked for hours. The mind learns that it can experience the feeling without being trapped by it indefinitely. Physical movement offers another powerful avenue for regulation, especially when the pain lives strongly in the body. And you do not need intense exercise or a specific routine. A 20-minute walk at a comfortable pace, focusing on the sensation of your feet meeting the ground, can help discharge stored tension. Or try progressive muscle relaxation. Tense a group of muscles for 5 seconds, perhaps the fists or the shoulders, then release them slowly while noticing the contrast. Repeat through the major muscle groups. The body often holds what the mind has been carrying, and gentle, intentional movement tends to create space for that tension to ease without requiring you to analyze the source again. Many individuals notice that after consistent movement practices, their sleep improves and their capacity to handle daily stressors increases measurably. It is equally important to address the environment and routines that support regulation. Any simple choices, keeping a consistent sleep schedule, limiting exposure to triggers when you are already depleted, and surrounding yourself with a few reliable sources of calm, can reduce the baseline level of intensity over weeks and months. If certain people or situations reliably amplify the pain, you may choose to create clearer boundaries around them, communicating those boundaries with calm directness rather than reactivity. This is not withdrawal from life, it is responsible stewardship of your own nervous system so you can show up more fully when it matters. Challenges will arise, of course. Some days the intensity may feel too high for any tool to touch, and that is part of the human experience. On those days, the wisest regulation may simply be rest, nourishment, and the acknowledgement we practiced earlier. This is heavy right now, and it is okay to move more slowly. Other times, old habits, scrolling endlessly, overworking, or isolating completely, may try to reassert themselves. When you notice that pull, treat it with the same neutral observation. The urge to escape is here. Then gently return to one of the tools we have covered. Each return strengthens the new pathway. Progress is rarely linear, yet the cumulative effect of these small, repeated choices tends to create a noticeable shift in how steadily you can carry the pain. As regulation becomes more natural, something deeper begins to happen. The emotional energy that once scattered your focus starts to collect, and you gain bandwidth for the next phase of turning pain into power, directing that collected energy toward meaningful action rather than letting it dissipate in overwhelm. This is where the raw material of your experience begins to reveal its potential, not as something you force, but as something you learn to channel with increasing skill and integrity. You are building a quiet mastery here. Each time you choose to regulate rather than react, you demonstrate to yourself that you are no longer at the mercy of the pain. You are learning to hold it, to move with it, and to remain in charge of your own responses. That steadiness is the beginning of true inner power, power that does not deny difficulty, but refuses to be defined by it. With the ability to regulate emotional intensity now taking root, so we arrive at a crucial turning point in this process, the deliberate cultivation of inner discipline and strength. This is the phase where regulated pain stops being something you simply manage and begins to become a steady source of forward momentum. It is not about pushing through discomfort with sheer willpower or ignoring your limits. Instead, it is about building a reliable internal structure, one that allows you to take consistent, meaningful action even on the days when motivation feels distant or the old ache resurfaces. When discipline is developed thoughtfully, it transforms the raw energy held in your pain into a quiet, enduring force that supports you rather than scatters you.
let us look at why this step matters so deeply. After acknowledgement, reframing, and regulation, many people notice a temporary sense of relief or clarity. The intensity has eased enough to breathe again. Yet without a deliberate practice of discipline, that clarity can fade back into old patterns because the nervous system and the mind still default to what feels familiar. Pain, even when well managed, carries a kind of gravitational pull toward withdrawal or distraction. Discipline counters that pull not by fighting it directly, but by creating small, repeatable structures that prove to you, through lived experience, that you can choose your direction regardless of how you feel in any given moment. The psychological research on habit formation and resilience repeatedly shows that individuals who develop consistent behavioral patterns during difficult periods tend to experience greater long-term stability and a stronger sense of self-efficacy. The pain remains part of the story, but it no longer dictates the plot. Think of discipline here as a form of inner architecture. Just as a well-built bridge can carry heavy loads without collapsing, a disciplined inner life can hold the weight of past pain while still allowing steady progress across it. This architecture is built one small beam at a time. It begins with identifying a single area of your life where you want to reclaim agency, perhaps your physical health, your work responsibilities, your creative pursuits, or your relationships. Choose something specific and achievable. That's not overwhelming. Then commit to one micro action related to that area that you can perform daily, even when the pain feels present. The key is to make the action small enough that it feels doable on low motivation days, yet meaningful enough that completing it sends a clear signal to your mind: I am still in charge. For example, if the pain has affected your sense of purpose at work, your micro-action might be spending 10 focused minutes each morning reviewing your most important task for the day before checking any messages. If it has dimmed your physical vitality, it could be a 5-minute walk around the block right after waking, no matter the weather. If relationships feel strained, it might be writing one short, honest note of appreciation to someone in your life each evening. Or the content of the action matters less than the consistency of showing up for it. When you complete it on a day when the ache is loud, you are not denying the pain. You are demonstrating that the pain does not own your choices. Over weeks, these small wins accumulate, strengthening the neural pathways associated with self-trust and capability. You begin to trust that you can act in alignment with your values, even when feelings pull in the opposite direction. A practical way to support this building process is to create what we might call a daily anchor routine. This is a short sequence of behaviors you perform in the same order each day, designed to bookend your time with intention. It might look like this: a brief body scan and acknowledgement upon waking, followed by your chosen micro-action, then a moment of reframing if needed, and ending the day with a quick regulation breath before sleep. The routine does not have to be long. 15 or 20 minutes total is often enough. Its power lies in its predictability. The mind and body learn that certain times of day are reserved for deliberate choice rather than reaction. In many cases, people who establish such anchors report that the emotional intensity becomes less disruptive because there is now a clear structure holding their days together. The pain is still felt, but it has a designated place within a larger framework of action. Of course, building discipline in the presence of pain brings its own set of challenges, and it is wise to anticipate them. There will be days when the micro-action feels impossible, when the weight of everything you have carried makes even the smallest step seem heavy. On those days, I scale the action down further if necessary, perhaps from 10 minutes of focused work to simply opening the document and sitting with it for 2 minutes. The goal is not heroic effort, but unbroken consistency.
Completing a tiny version of the action still counts fully because it reinforces the identity of someone who follows through. Another common hurdle is the inner critic that arises when progress feels slow. This is not enough. You should be further along by now. Meet that voice with the same neutral acknowledgement we practiced earlier, then gently return to the action. Self-criticism tends to drain the very energy needed for discipline. Treating it as passing noise preserves your resources. It can also be helpful to track your consistency in a simple, private way, not as a score to judge yourself by, but as data to observe patterns. A small notebook or digital note where you mark each day you completed the micro-action can reveal helpful insights. You might notice that certain times of day or certain triggers make the practice easier or harder. This awareness allows you to adjust your environment or timing without abandoning the commitment. Over time, the tracking itself becomes part of the discipline, turning abstract intention into visible evidence of your growing strength. As this inner discipline strengthens, something important begins to shift in how you experience your pain. The same discomfort that once paralyzed action now sits alongside it. You act not because the pain has vanished, but because you have learned that action is possible in its presence. This is where the pain starts to reveal its potential as fuel. But the energy that used to be spent in rumination or avoidance is gradually redirected into the micro-actions and routines you have chosen. You begin to feel a quiet accumulation of personal power, not the flashy kind that seeks attention, but the steady kind that shows up reliably when life asks more of you. Relationships benefit because you can show up with greater presence rather than being pulled away by unregulated emotion. Opportunities that once felt out of reach become more accessible because you have trained yourself to move forward regardless of mood. This cultivation of discipline is fundamentally an act of self-respect. It says, without words, that your future matters enough to invest in it today, even when today feels heavy. It is ethical because it harms no one and benefits both yourself and those around you through your increased steadiness and reliability. And it is sustainable because it is built gradually with compassion for the human limits you carry. As this section comes to a close, recognize the profound step you are taking. By choosing to build discipline amid your pain, you are no longer merely surviving it, you are learning to harness it. The strength you are developing is not loud or aggressive, it is calm, consistent, and deeply rooted. It prepares the ground for the next essential movement, learning to channel the collected energy of your experience into purposeful, meaningful goals that give your life renewed direction and depth. You are proving, day by day, that the darkest chapters do not have the final word. And your disciplined choices are writing the next ones. Having built a foundation of acknowledgement, reframing, regulation, and disciplined action, we now reach the stage where the energy held within your pain begins to find its most constructive outlet, channeling it into purposeful, meaningful goals. This is the moment when what was once raw discomfort starts to become directed momentum, not by forcing a dramatic reinvention of your life, but by aligning small, consistent choices with what truly matters to you now. The pain does not vanish in this process. It becomes part of the fuel that powers clearer decisions and more intentional steps forward. When channeled thoughtfully, this energy tends to increase the likelihood of creating outcomes that feel aligned with your deeper values. It's while preserving the integrity and ethical foundation we have maintained throughout. Let us pause here to understand the natural flow of this transition. Up to this point, much of the work has been inward, facing what is, seeing it differently, calming its intensity, and proving to yourself that you can act despite it. Now the focus gently expands outward, The regulated and disciplined inner state you have been cultivating creates the bandwidth needed to ask a more forward-looking question. Given everything I have carried and everything I have learned from it, what do I want to move toward? Not as compensation for the pain, not as a way to erase it, but as an authentic expression of the person you are becoming. This question, when asked from a place of calm awareness rather than urgency, often reveals goals that feel both realistic and deeply resonant. Consider how this channeling looks in everyday human experience. Someone who has walked through a painful professional setback might notice that the experience sharpened their ability to recognize misalignment in their work. Instead of rushing back into the same patterns, they begin to direct that insight toward a goal that feels more sustainable, perhaps refining a skill that matters to them, seeking roles with clearer boundaries, or even exploring a side pursuit that once felt too risky. The original pain is not forgotten. It informs the goal. It provides the clarity that helps them choose actions with greater precision. In many cases, and people who channel pain in this way report that their efforts feel less scattered and more sustainable because the motivation is no longer abstract ambition, but lived understanding. The energy that once looped inward now moves outward in a focused current. To make this real for you right now, let us walk through a practical process you can use to begin channeling. First, return briefly to the acknowledgement and reframing practices. Bring the pain to mind with neutral presence, then widen the frame to include what it has already taught you about your values and capacities. From that steadier place, ask yourself 3 gentle, open questions. What is one area of my life where I sense a quiet pull toward growth or contribution that feels authentic rather than obligatory? How might the lessons from my pain, whether about resilience, boundaries, but empathy or clarity, directly support progress in that area? What is one small, specific goal I could set for the next 30 days that honors both the reality of the pain and my desire to move forward with purpose? Write these answers if it helps, or simply hold them in awareness for a few minutes. The goal you identify does not need to be large or impressive to others. It might be as straightforward as completing a short daily writing practice to process and create from your experience, or reaching out consistently in a relationship with more honest communication, or dedicating focused time each week to a skill that once brought you quiet satisfaction. The important element is that the goal feels connected to the insights you have gained. When the action is rooted in that connection, the pain's energy tends to flow into it more naturally, reducing the internal resistance that often arises with unrelated pursuits. Once the goal is clear, break it into micro actions that fit within the disciplined routines you established in the previous section. Use the same daily anchor practice as a container. For instance, if your goal involves rebuilding a sense of contribution at work, your micro action might be preparing one high-quality piece of input for a meeting each day, something thoughtful, prepared from a regulated state. If the goal centers on personal creativity, it could be 15 minutes of uninterrupted time spent on that pursuit, bookended by a regulation breath. The repetition of these actions, done in the presence of the pain rather than in spite of it, creates a powerful feedback loop. Each completion reinforces the message that you can direct your life even while carrying what has happened. Over time, this tends to build a quiet momentum that feels less like effort and more like natural progression. It is worth noting that channeling in this way often brings its own subtle challenges. Old doubts may surface. Who am I to pursue this after everything that has happened? Or, what if I fail again? When those thoughts arise, treat them with the same compassionate regulation we practiced earlier. Name them, breathe through the intensity, then return to the micro action. The discipline you have already developed gives you the steadiness to continue. You may also notice that some goals need adjustment as you go. Life continues to move and new information appears. Flexibility here is not a sign of weakness. It is strategic wisdom. Revising a goal while staying true to the underlying value keeps the process ethical and sustainable. As you channel the energy consistently, something deeper begins to emerge. The pain starts to feel less like a separate burden and more like an integrated part of your drive. You may find yourself communicating with greater clarity because you understand your own needs more fully. You may notice stronger relationships forming because your actions now carry the weight of earned insight rather than reactivity. Opportunities that align with your new direction often appear more readily, not because the world has changed, but because your focused presence makes you better equipped to recognize and engage them. In many cases, this channeling phase leads to a renewed sense of meaning that does not deny the darkness but stands beside it, balanced and intentional. This is where the transformation from pain to power becomes most visible in daily life. The power is not loud or domineering, it is the calm authority of someone who has faced difficulty directly, regulated it wisely, disciplined themselves through it, and now directs its energy toward ends that benefit both themselves and those around them. It shows up in the steadiness of your choices, the integrity of your words, and the quiet confidence that you can continue moving forward even if new challenges arise. Ethical influence flows naturally from this place because your actions are rooted in self-awareness and mutual respect rather than any need to control outcomes or people. You are already demonstrating this capacity simply by continuing through these sections with presence and intention. Each time you return to the practices and apply them to a chosen goal, you strengthen the channel. The darkest pain you have known is no longer only a wound, it is becoming part of the architecture of a life that moves with greater purpose and depth. As this section concludes, carry forward the quiet realization that you now possess the tools to direct what once directed you. The energy you have been learning to channel is real, measurable in your daily choices, and available to you in every moment you choose to engage it. This sets the stage for our final section, integrating all these elements so that the power you are cultivating becomes a sustainable, natural part of who you are, not a temporary phase, but a lasting shift in how you navigate the world. You have come far. The path ahead continues with the same calm strength you are already showing. We arrive now at the final section of our journey together, the place where all the preceding steps begin to weave themselves into a single, sustainable whole. This is the integration phase, the quiet culmination where acknowledgement, reframing, regulation, disciplined action, and purposeful channeling no longer feel like separate practices, but become the natural rhythm of how you move through life. The darkest pain that once felt like an intruder has, through consistent effort, started to settle into its proper place, not erased, not glorified, but integrated as a deep source of insight and strength that supports you without defining you. This integration does not happen in one dramatic moment. It unfolds gradually through the repeated choice to live the principles we have explored until they shape the way you think, respond, and create in the world around you. Let us consider what this integrated state actually looks like in daily human experience. You wake up and the old ache may still be present, but it no longer demands your full attention the moment your eyes open. Instead, you move through your morning anchor routine with a kind of quiet familiarity, acknowledging what is there, reframing any lingering tightness with the wider lens you have practiced, regulating the intensity with a few steady breaths, and stepping into the micro actions that align with the goals you have chosen. The pain has become background information rather than foreground command. How it informs your choices without overwhelming them.
You notice this shift most clearly in moments that once would have triggered a strong reaction, a difficult conversation, an unexpected setback, or a quiet hour when memories surface. Where before you might have been pulled under, you now observe the wave, regulate it, and return to your chosen direction with steadier hands. This is not the absence of difficulty. It is the presence of a reliable inner structure that holds steady even when life tests it. Psychological patterns observed across many people who have walked similar paths show that this kind of integration tends to strengthen over months and years when the practices remain consistent. The neural pathways you have been reinforcing, pathways of awareness, flexibility, self-regulation, and purposeful action, become more automatic. And what once required deliberate effort starts to feel like your default operating system. You begin to trust yourself in a deeper way, not because the pain has disappeared, but because you have proven through lived repetition that you can carry it while still choosing your responses. This trust is the foundation of the pure power we have been moving toward, the calm, ethical authority that comes from knowing you can face what is real and still move forward with integrity. A key element of successful integration is learning to revisit and adapt the practices as life continues to change. The pain itself may evolve, some days lighter, other days echoing more strongly when new stresses appear. Rather than viewing these fluctuations as setbacks, you treat them as signals to return to the beginning with fresh awareness. Perhaps you lengthen the acknowledgement practice during a particularly heavy week, or you refine your reframing questions to address a new layer that has surfaced. The regulation tools become more refined. The disciplined micro-actions might shift to match a changing goal. This adaptability is not a sign that the process has failed. It is evidence that you are applying the work with intelligence and respect for your own humanity. In many cases, people who maintain this flexible integration report that their overall resilience increases over time, making future challenges feel less destabilizing because the internal framework is already in place. As integration deepens, you will likely notice its effects spreading into your relationships and your wider contributions. But communication becomes clearer because you are no longer reacting from unregulated intensity. You speak from a place of regulated awareness and reframed understanding. Boundaries feel more natural to express and maintain because they are rooted in self-respect rather than fear. You listen to others with greater presence since your own inner noise has quieted enough to make space for theirs. In your work or creative pursuits, the goals you channel energy toward often carry a quiet depth that others can sense, an authenticity that tends to draw opportunities and connections aligned with your values. This is ethical influence in its truest form, not strategic maneuvering, but the natural outcome of a person who has done the inner work and now shows up more fully for themselves and for those around them. A mutual benefit emerges organically when your actions are grounded in personal responsibility and clear intention. It is also important to recognize that integration includes permission to rest without guilt. There will be seasons when the disciplined pace needs to soften, when life asks for a period of simpler maintenance rather than active expansion. During those times, you might return more frequently to acknowledgement and regulation while allowing the channeling goals to pause or simplify. This is wise stewardship, not retreat. The power you have cultivated is sustainable precisely because you honor the full range of your human needs. Over time, these balanced rhythms prevent burnout and allow the strength you have built to endure. One of the most profound shifts that occurs with full integration is the way you begin to see your entire story. The darkest pain no longer stands alone as a separate chapter that must be overcome. It becomes threaded through the larger narrative as the very material that sharpened your awareness, deepened your empathy, strengthened your discipline, and clarified your direction. You carry it not as a burden, but as earned wisdom that informs how you navigate uncertainty. This does not mean you dwell on it constantly. It means you have made peace with its presence in a way that frees you to live more expansively. The power that emerges from this integration is pure in the sense that it is unforced, unpretentious, and deeply aligned with who you truly are. It shows itself in the quiet confidence with which you face each day, and the integrity with which you treat others, and the steady persistence with which you pursue what matters. As we near the close of this section, take a moment to feel the full weight of what you have accomplished by staying with this process. You have moved through the darkness not by denying it or rushing past it, but by meeting it with calm, strategic awareness and ethical commitment. The tools are now yours to keep. They will serve you not only in the aftermath of this particular pain, but in any future difficulty that life may bring. The pure power you have been turning toward is not a destination you reach and then leave behind. It is a living capacity that grows stronger with every honest choice you make to acknowledge, reframe, regulate, discipline, channel, and integrate. You now stand in a different relationship to your experience, since the pain that once threatened to diminish you has become part of the foundation that elevates you. It has increased the likelihood that you will continue to grow, to contribute, and to live with greater clarity and purpose. This is the quiet victory available to any human being willing to do the work. It requires no special circumstances, no external validation, only your continued presence and choice. Carry this truth with you as the words end here. The power is real. It is already taking shape within you, and it will continue to unfold day by day as you choose to live it. As we come to the end of this journey together, take a moment to sit with the full arc of what we have explored. You began in the quiet territory of your darkest pain, the kind that presses in during still hours and reshapes how the world feels on ordinary days. We did not rush past it or dress it up with easy promises. Instead, we met it directly, first by acknowledging its presence without resistance, then by gently reframing it through a wider, more honest lens, regulating its intensity so it no longer dictated your every moment, building disciplined action that proved your capacity to move forward anyway, channeling its energy into purposeful goals that felt true to the person you are becoming, and finally, integrating all of these elements until they became the steady rhythm beneath your daily life. Each step was practical, each one grounded in the observable realities of human experience rather than fleeting inspiration. And now here you are, still carrying what happened, yet no longer defined solely by it. This transformation from pain into pure power does not announce itself with fanfare. It reveals itself quietly in the way you respond to a difficult morning, in the clearer conversations you now have, in the small goals you continue to pursue, even when the old ache tries to pull you back. You may notice that decisions feel less heavy because you have practiced meeting discomfort with awareness instead of avoidance. Relationships may carry more depth because you communicate from a regulated place rather than from raw reactivity. Opportunities that once seemed distant appear more accessible simply because your focus is no longer scattered by unregulated emotion. These shifts tend to compound. They do not erase the past, but they reweave it into a larger story, one where difficulty becomes part of the material that strengthened you, clarified your values, and sharpened your direction. But the power we have been speaking of is not the kind that seeks to dominate or impress. It is the calm, enduring authority that comes from knowing yourself more fully than before. It is the ability to face uncertainty without being overtaken by it. It is the quiet confidence that you can acknowledge pain, regulate it, act despite it, and direct its energy toward ends that serve both you and the people around you.
This power increases the likelihood that you will navigate future challenges with greater steadiness and integrity. It encourages mutual benefit in your interactions, ethical choices in your pursuits, and a balanced trust that grows through consistent evidence rather than blind assumption. Above all, it is sustainable because it rests on personal responsibility and compassionate self-awareness rather than on any external condition changing first. You may find in the weeks and months ahead that certain practices call to you more strongly on some days than others. That is natural. Return to acknowledgement when the weight feels fresh again. Use reframing when old narratives try to narrow your view. Lean on regulation tools when intensity rises unexpectedly. Keep the micro actions alive even when motivation dips, because they are the proof that you remain in charge. Channel the energy toward the goals that still resonate, adjusting them as life reveals new information. And let integration happen in the background, through the simple repetition of showing up for yourself with honesty and discipline. These are not tasks to complete and then set aside. They are ways of being that become more natural the longer you live them. It can be helpful to create one final personal ritual as a way to mark this transition. Perhaps once a month, in a quiet space that feels safe, you review the journey without judgment. Note what has shifted in how you carry the pain. Acknowledge any progress, however small. Reaffirm one value that has become clearer because of what you have been through. Then breathe steadily and step back into your day, carrying that updated awareness with you. This ritual is not about measuring success against some perfect standard. It is about honoring the ongoing nature of growth and reminding yourself that the framework is always available. As you move forward from here, do remember that the human capacity for this kind of transformation is real and widely observed across different lives and circumstances. It does not require perfect conditions or superhuman effort. It asks only for your continued presence, your willingness to choose the next right action, and your commitment to doing so with ethical care. The pain you have known has already shown you depths of resilience you may not have recognized before. Now that resilience is becoming part of your everyday operating system, quiet, reliable, and yours to draw upon whenever life asks more of you. You have already demonstrated remarkable strength simply by staying with this process from the first words of the hook until now. That choice itself is evidence of the power taking shape within you. It will continue to grow not because circumstances guarantee it, but because you have equipped yourself with the tools and the understanding to keep nurturing it. The darkest chapters do not disappear, yet they no longer hold the final pen. You are writing the next ones with clearer vision and steadier hands. Let this ending be less like a conclusion and more like an open doorway. Step through it with the calm authority you have been cultivating. Carry the pain with dignity, direct its energy with purpose, and live the integration with quiet consistency. The power you have turned toward is already here, pure, ethical, and deeply human. It belongs to you now, and it will serve you in every season that follows. Thank you for sharing this journey. May the work we have done together support you in creating a life that feels more integrated, more directed, and more resilient.
Even in the presence of life's inevitable challenges,